I can't actually get my head around the fact that tomorrow, around about this time actually, we'll have all the information about the Nintendo Switch 2 that people have been speculating about for years. There are some games that I had hoped we would be playing by now, one of those being Silksong, and the team over at Aquatic Moon Games clearly felt that they could do something worthwhile before Switch 2 arrives, and that comes in the form of Twilight Monk. Is this one the Switch's silky swan song, or Silksong at home? Well, my name's Mark Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. The storyline here centers around Raziel. He's a monk who sets out to stop Nox, a traitor who's attempting to collect 3 rings that have the potential to unleash the World Eater upon the land of Speria. The narrative leans heavily into Eastern-inspired fantasy with mystical elements, ancient orders, and a reasonably eclectic side cast of anthropomorphic creatures. While the writing is serviceable for the most part, I found the main protagonist to be a little difficult to like. He's a bit of a smart ass, to be honest. It was one of those situations where you come across the villain and you're like, yeah, he's alright, he makes a lot of sense. Still, he does grow on you, and some of the inhabitants of Speria are really interesting to get to know. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of gameplay, do stick around because it's actually quite strange. It's not your traditional side perspective all the time. Sometimes it switches to an isometric view, and there are a few gameplay elements I just didn't expect. So then you play as Raziel, who's armed with that phantom pillar. It's a chained weapon that's not only used for attacking but also defense and light platforming. You can plonk it down on the ground and use it to reach higher places, with a design inspired by traditional Eastern weapons. When the pillar's on the ground, he'll also perform the tiniest of little punches and kicks, and you can recall it Scorpion style back to your hand. The combat's enhanced by unlockable mystic arts. They act as special moves, things like daggers, stone axes, and even Zelda-like bombs to clear terrain. They consume a limited magic resource. This is regained by destroying lanterns and beating enemies, and later you'll gain access to things like summons, which provide support or buffs during battle. Enemies come in all different shapes and sizes, and initially you haven't really got much in the way of moves to deal with them. You don't unlock your dash move for a couple of hours and your double jump, so it can feel a little limited in how you tackle these. Thankfully, as you unlock those abilities, the fluidity of combat improves significantly. You might have also noticed that there's a level gauge in the corner, and your character will level up. You won't be putting points into a tree or skill system, but it will permanently make you stronger. Sometimes killing enemies, they'll drop food items which restores your health, which is measured in soul lanterns. Collect 3 shards, gain an extra one, you know the drill. As with the combat, traversal becomes much easier as you unlock those abilities. Has to be said, that dash move is so smooth and satisfying, as is the slide for squeezing through tighter areas, and there are teleportation trees for getting around. Now, initially things seem straightforward, very Hollow Knight-like, but the developers have opted to go a different route. Firstly, there are segments where it switches to a more semi-open world feel with an overworld map used to travel between towns, and these areas are presented from an isometric view, which does contrast nicely with the 2.5D action gameplay. On the overworld map, you'll encounter shadow entities that teleport you into self-contained battle stages. This is an interesting idea, and there's something of note here. You can escape in either direction or try and kill the enemies, and often find hidden chests within these stages, but if you die, you'll go back to your last save point, losing anything you'd gained since it. With that in mind, there are a couple of things you can do, because if you're not prepared and die, it could be a bit frustrating. One of those is to enter a shop and purchase a potion that will only activate when you die. This gives you a bit of insurance, and there are other items like being able to purchase a token that sits in your inventory, and it slows down the speed of those enemies on the map so they don't get you, if you want to just explore. Surprisingly, Twilight Monk features a little town within which you can gradually purchase new shops and unlock new areas. It's nice to see a mechanic like that where it's not a roguelite, and you'll need the game's currency penny to do that. Buy useful items, purchase maps and charms, and that's probably a good time to talk about the boss fights. Now, I have trained my kids so that they know when a boss is coming up, and I'm sure we all do. You enter an area, there's a save point, suddenly the music dips down, and your brain just goes, there's a boss coming up. That's exactly the case here. There are tons of them, some of them optional, some of them not. They are enjoyable, but they do highlight one of the things which stands out to me about Twilight Monk. And I try and say this in the nicest possible way. Some of the movement and animation, it can look a little bit cheap. Not on things like the dash move, they look good. It's the way some of those enemies attack and the kinds of movements you have to do. It can feel a little stunted. It's most evident during those boss fights, and their patterns and loops are quite small, so it won't take you long to overcome most of them. Now, I mentioned the difficulty and how the save system works, and there were a few times where I'd find myself backtracking long distances just to go back to an old save point so I don't lose all my progress. The reason being, the health drops from enemies are a little bit too few and far between. You could go an entire area without seeing a single one and then have 3 at the same time, like buses. However, as mentioned, purchasing one of those little potions from Juby's Rock House took away a lot of the worry, but the game's currency comes in slowly, so spending so much on that, it stung a little. Now, there is more depth here for completionists, things like spider gems, which are found if you go off the beaten path and can be used to unlock a secret area, no spoilers, as well as walls to hidden areas that can be knocked down, and treasure chests opened if you have a key. And you'll find talismans that can be equipped to your character to give permanent buffs. All the usual stuff, but a sprinkling of different elements was enough for me to make this one feel like it was its own game. I do have a few gripes, things like contact damage from enemies. That always annoys me. It's not a huge issue if that damage is very small, but when it takes off a third of your health, it's just annoying. Particularly when you unlock the dash move, something in my brain was like, it's fine, I can dash through enemies now. No, you can't. You should have been able to. It would have made the combat much more smooth. And as I mentioned, the main character, he's just not very likable. A shame next to the cast, who are actually really cool. Still a fun game. Gameplay scores 15 out of 20. The controls score 16 out of 20. Visually, Twilight Monk is quite lovely. I'm a big fan of the isometric perspective sections. What's also impressive are that the small characters here, they're reflected very well within the character portraits when you directly communicate with someone. The art style in general is just really well done. There are lots of parallax scrolling screens, small details such as snow falling in the background, and it's facilitated with what I think is an excellent soundtrack. It's just one of those that has that mystical quality to it, that echoey goodness. Performance-wise though, we do have a few stutters on Switch. There's no irony, is there, that literally tomorrow we'll have a system that can run this game most likely at 60 FPS, but here we've got one that's running at a 30 FPS with some drops. The frame pacing is pretty bad at times. Load transitions are not a problem, they're actually fine, but this shouldn't be stuttering. It looks nice, but it's certainly not doing anything that Hollow Knight or Ori and the Will of the Wisps didn't do a few years ago without performance issues. Another visual element that I've almost become accustomed to with the best Metroidvanias on Switch are map markers. I like to leave little markers about, letting myself know where to revisit, where I've been, but you don't have that here, and it actually stands out quite a lot these days. Again, that might not be an issue for you, but for me, taking screenshots of the map is a bit of a pain. Artistically, really nice. Performance, not as good as it should be. Visuals and performance score 14 out of 20. I personally very much enjoyed the soundtrack, but some sound effects didn't quite land. Audio scores 16 out of 20. Twilight Monk retails at £16.75 here in the UK, but it has a 10% sale, which takes it down to £15.07. It's got to be really difficult putting out games next to Hollow Knight, but around £15 seems to be the average. The average player is going to finish this one in around about 10 to 15 hours, and it's got a 1.6 gig download. I'm not sure about physical release, it would be nice to have one. Value scores 14 out of 20. So there we have it, Twilight Monk. Has a few nice ideas, a couple of quirks, but overall an enjoyable time. It gets a SwitchUp score of 75%. Let me know in the comments, are you going to be buying any more games, or will you be waiting until tomorrow, finding out what else is going to take all of your money? You never know, we might see Silksong in the Direct. We won't see Silksong in the Direct. Thank you for all of you that enjoy the content, to our Patreons, our members, and as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!